At school, did your teacher talk about 9/11?
No, she didn't talk about 9/11.
What is 9/11?
9/11 is when these people, they crashed into things, and it was like an hour apart, and then everything crashed. And then on one of the things, a girl stopped the pilot guy so he wouldn't crash into the White House, I think.
It's hard enough to impart to one's pupils a body of basic knowledge, information and understanding about history, geography, religion, geopolitics, and more. But when it comes to September 11 and the issues surrounding it, all of that knowledge is embedded within a complex web of values, emotions, prejudices, opinions, and hopes, all of them subject to intense disagreement among adults and mighty battles among the nation's leaders. What is a 5th or 10th grade teacher to do? Well, let's find out. Meet Miss Mesler, a 3rd grade teacher at Les Jardins Academy.
I'm Katie Mesler, and I teach 3rd grade at Les Jardins.
Okay, do you believe the events of 9/11 should be taught in school? Why or why not?
Yes, I do feel the event should be taught in school. I feel like it was, and it's an important part of history, and I do feel that the kids should be aware of what happened that day. Yes.
Okay, what guidelines, if any, does your school give you about teaching the events of 9/11?
In previous schools at a public school, there were no guidelines given, as well as Les Jardins, there were no guidelines given, just that we were all to attend the assembly on 9/11.
Okay, how do you teach the events of 9/11 in your classes?
Typically, it's just a discussion that I have with my kids. I always start it with what do they know, what kind of background knowledge do they come with, and kind of take it from there based on what they know, and just give them more information as to the events that have happened that day and why they did.
Okay. Have you ever taught the events of 9/11 from different perspectives, such as the terrorist point of view? Why have you taught from these perspectives, or why have you chosen not to teach from different perspectives?
That's a good question. I've never taught from their perspective, only from the perspective here in America and how it impacted us as Americans. I've never taught it from their perspective, and I feel like, I guess, probably because I'm not educated enough to know, their perspective or why it happened. Yeah.
Okay. When you teach 9/11, do you try to focus on accepting diversity, or do you focus on the positives of the event?
I do talk about the positive things that have come after it, the togetherness that it brought to our country, but never from other perspectives, just from ours here in America, and how it affected us.
Do you talk about the negative repercussions that came from it too?
Negative and positive,
okay.
Yes.
How do you think this generation of leaders' views on 9/11 will affect the future decisions of our nation?
I do think it has affected decisions that our leaders make today. Just being more careful, being more aware of different countries and the perspective that they have of us, and us of them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Now meet Nicole Jones, a 3rd grade teacher at St. Anthony School.
Hi, I'm Nicole Jones, and I'm a 3rd grade teacher at St. Anthony School in Kailua.
Hi, do you believe the events of 9/11 should be taught in school? Why or why not?
I do. In 3rd grade at our school, we did bring it up during a mass. We had a celebration, and we watched a brain pop video that I have behind me. which talks all about why did they do it, what events took place, and since we have a lot of military students at our school, we find it's very necessary to talk about it.
Okay, and what guidelines, if any, does your school give you about teaching the events of 9/11?
We don't exactly have guidelines, but basically featuring it to the age level that we're teaching. For third grade, talking about God and different religions and why they did it was what we focused on, and believing in our one true God is what led us to watch the Brain Pop video and discuss it further, whereas I think other schools don't have the faith base to discuss those options.
Okay, so the school did tell you to teach about it, though? Or...
They did want us to follow up on it after Mass.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Have you ever taught the... Wait, sorry. How do you teach the events of 9/11 in your classroom?
I didn't exactly teach it. Luckily, our priest went over it, and then when we came back to our classroom, I played the video right away, and it was just the kids discussing it and me taking questions.
Okay. Have you ever taught the events of 9/11 from different perspectives, such as from the terrorist point of view? Why have you taught from these perspectives, or why have you chosen not to teach from different perspectives?
Over here, we don't exactly teach from different perspectives. I did talk about fairness and letting people believe what they want, and saying, I guess it goes into my whole Martin Luther King Jr. theme, where being treated equally. And in this event, we were talking more so along the lines of how cruel you can be to people who are different, and how it would make you feel if you were different and someone did this to you, or to our island, per se.
How do you think this generation of leaders' views on 9/11 will influence the future decisions of our nation?
Greatly. That's why it's so important to talk about it, because history does shape our future, and these students knowing about treating each other equally, being fair, believing in God, and loving thy neighbor will help to never have this happen again, hopefully.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So those are two third grade teachers from two schools. Both the schools and the teachers themselves are totally different, but there were two big similarities in the way they taught 9/11. One is that the schools didn't give the teachers much guidelines or direction.
At a public school, there were no guidelines given, as well as Les Jardins, there were no guidelines given.
We don't exactly have guidelines.
Another similarity is that the teachers didn't teach 9/11 from different perspectives.
But never from other perspectives.
Over here, we don't exactly teach from different perspectives.
You're probably wondering why it's so important to teach 9/11 in classrooms anyways. The point isn't exactly to know about the event itself. It's to learn from it and to apply that understanding when dealing with future events. Miss Stewart, a middle school social studies teacher, explains one of the biggest concepts students should be learning from 9/11.
I think, though, that it's important for this generation to learn from adults that when things happen that we disagree with, we can't only ask how can we get revenge or how can we address this. We could at least ask the question, why did this happen, and is there something we could do to prevent it? You know, so that we're asking for the roots of problems instead of just how to take, you know, I don't want to take action after the problem to address it. I'm hoping that we can teach students to ask, well, what is the root of the problem, and can that be addressed in a way that's short of revenge?
Now the question is this being taught? According to most sources, it isn't. In fact, only about 24 states require 9/11 even be mentioned in public schools. The schools that aren't required to teach it aren't likely to teach it because of limited time and resources, on top of pressure to only teach what will be tested. And in terms of the schools that are required, most of their curriculum doesn't even approach these ideas. This is a big deal, considering almost 90% of American students go to public schools. I'm honestly scared. If my generation isn't learning from events such as 9/11, when we're the leaders, we'll be making the exact same mistakes our nation's making today.
How can you say no child is left behind? We're not dumb and we're not blind. They're all sitting in your cells while you pay